As bad as I want to keep pushing ahead with this application, we're actually going to slow it down a little bit, and we're going to build on our infrastructure by implementing a dependency injection container. And one of the reasons for that is because we're starting to get a lot of services in our application. As you can see, when we wanted to test out our buy stock service, we had to create an account service. And to create the account service, we had to create a DB context factory. Then we had to create a stock price service. Then we had to create our buy stock service with all the services injected into the constructor right here. Or in other words, passed into the constructor, injected, passed in, kind of the same terminology we're going to be using when we talk about dependency injection. But ideally what I want to do is I just want to ask for my buy stock service from somewhere, and that somewhere is going to be my dependency injection container, and it'll give me the buy stock service with all of its dependencies passed in already, so we don't have to do this manually. And that's going to give us two benefits. So it's going to allow us to ask for a service with all the dependencies already given to us, and it's also going to allow us to define all of our services and dependencies in a dependency injection container, which is going to be at the root of our application, and it's going to keep all of our services and dependencies in one place so we can control our application and the services from that one place. And we're going to see that in just a little bit when we implement this dependency injection container. So this app.xaml.cs is really the root of our application. It's where we start up our application, it's where we show our window, so everything about SimpleTrader starts here. And because of that, we're actually going to implement our dependency injection container in this app class. So we're going to create a method down here. It's going to return an iServiceProvider, which is basically just an object that returns services that anyone asks for. And we're going to call this createServiceProvider. And inside here, we're going to create a service collection, not to be confused with the service provider. And we'll call this services, and it's going to be a new service collection, which we will import from Microsoft Extensions Dependency Injection. So dependency injection is actually built into .NET Core, so you should probably use it. So now that we have our service collection, we need to register our services, and we're just gonna register these services, and I'll show you how we resolve our buy stock service from the service provider. So there's actually three ways that you can register a service. You can add a singleton, which basically means that the service that you register, there will only be one per your application. You can register as a transient, where the service that you register, each time that someone asks for that service, a new object is returned. So you'll never have the same instance. It's a different instance every single time. And last but not least, there's also add scoped, which means that you get a different instance of the service per scope. And we can show how that works in just a little bit, because you might be confused, like, what is a scope? But for now, all that we're going to be doing is registering singleton, because these are just services. They don't have any state within them, so it's okay if we share the instance of, say, an account data service or a stock price service throughout the application. So to do this, we specify the interface, so an iStock price service, and then the implementation, which is just going to be a stock price service. So now every time we ask for an iStock price service, it'll give us a stock price service. So let's go ahead and do that for our other services. Add singleton. So whenever we ask for an iData service for accounts, we want to get an account data service. And then whenever we need a SimpleTrader DB context factory, we need to register that as well. And for this, you might notice we didn't actually have an interface here, and that's because we don't really have an abstraction for this. So if we look at this, well, I guess we could register this interface, but that's not really ours. That's part of Entity Framework Core. So we're just gonna register this without specifying an interface. So basically, whenever you ask the service provider for this, you have to ask for this concrete type. You can't ask for an interface. And last but not least, let's register our buy stock service. And that's just going to be our simple buy stock service. And last but not least, once you register all your services, you have to build your service collection into a service provider. And there we go. Oh, and you got to return it. Okay, so now we're going to get rid of all this. And I'm gonna first create our service provider. And then all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get my buy stock service from my service provider. And there's two ways of doing this. You can get service or get required service. The difference between these is get service will return null if your service hasn't been registered, and get required service will throw an exception if your service hasn't been registered. So I'm going to actually use get required service because I just can't have null in this situation. And we're going to be asking for an I buy stock service. And let's put a breakpoint here and make sure that we get our service. So let's hover over this, and we have our buy stock service, and our dependency injection container injected all of the other services that are required. So as you can see, we got our stock price service, we got our account service. Our account service has the DB context factory, so everything is working as planned. And all we had to do was ask our service provider for a service. We don't have to know about any of these implementations. So if we ever want to swap out any of these implementations, it's not going to affect the rest of our application. Because the rest of our application, pretty much everywhere we depend on interfaces. So all we can do is just swap these whenever we need to, and everything will work perfectly fine. Now you might be thinking, okay, great, we have our service provider, we can get services whenever we need them. Now all we need to do is pass our service provider throughout our application, pass it into our main view model, pass it into everywhere, and then we can ask the service provider for services whenever we need to, wherever we need them. And that is actually exactly what we don't want to do. That is known as the service locator pattern. It's an anti-pattern, and we're not going to be doing that because then your application has such a hard dependency on this service provider. And what we really want to do instead is we want to actually get our main view model from our service provider. And if you think about it, our main view model is really our entire application. So if we get our main view model from the service provider, then we basically resolve our application with all the services that we need, and everything stems from the service provider. In order for this to work though, we're going to have to register our main view model with our service provider. So let's go ahead down here, and we're going to add this main view model as scoped. And the reason we're not making it a singleton is because the main view model has state. It keeps track of things like the currently selected view model for the application. So we don't want to register it as a singleton because we might have someone else who comes along and wants a main view model that has different state. So with that in place, what we can do up here is instead of asking for a new main view model, we can ask our service provider for a main view model. And then, since we've registered it as scoped, if anyone wants a different instance of a main view model, what they can do is go ahead and create a new scope. So that's going to be service provider.create scope. And then they have their own scope, and what they can do is ask for their own instance of a main view model. And actually, I'll show you guys how the main view model that we get from here is different than this view model. So we'll put this into a variable, and then we will compare our different view model to our window.data context, which is the other main view model that we created. So let's put a breakpoint right here, and this should be false because they're different instances of main view models. And there we go, false. So if anyone wants a different instance of a main view model, they just got to create a new scope. So we can get rid of all that. We can get rid of our by stock service resolution, and now we are just resolving our main view model. But for this to be effective, we need to resolve the rest of our application when we ask for our main view model, and that's not what we're doing. So if we look at our main view model, as you can see, there's really nothing going on here, and the reason that nothing's going on here is because we new up a navigator up here, but we really want our navigator to be instantiated by our service provider by our dependency injection container. So what we're going to do is pass the navigator through the constructor, and then we're going to set it in the constructor, set this property, and then what we need to do is register our navigator with our dependency injection container. The interface type is going to be an iNavigator, and the implementation is going to be just our simple navigator. And we're doing this as scoped again because the navigator has state. This is what actually keeps track of the selected view model, so we don't want that to be a singleton. We don't want that necessarily to be shared. If anyone wants their own navigator, they can just create a new scope. So now, if we put a breakpoint here, we should successfully be passing our navigator through the constructor, which we are. But now, what is this really doing for us? Let's take a look at our navigator. And we have a current view model as a property, that's okay. But we have this update current view model command, and inside here, we create all of this stuff. So ideally, we want all of this to come from our dependency injection container. We want our view models, we want our major index service, our major index listing view model. All of this stuff should be registered with our dependency injection container, and we should be getting it from there instead. So we're going to actually have to do some refactoring here. And the first thing I see that I want to do is I want to create a factory method that will create view models for me. And what we're going to do after that is register that factory with our dependency injection container, and the factory is going to get a bunch of services sent down into it. So what we need to do is let's create a new folder here, and we'll call this factories. So this is going to be all of our view model factories. And inside here, we're just going to create an interface, and it'll be the iSimpleTrader view model abstract factory. And what it's going to do is all it's going to do is return a view model, and it'll be called create view model, and it's going to take in a specific view type to create from. And it'll give us back the correct view model depending on the view type. And let's go ahead and implement one, and you'll see why we called it an abstract factory and all that stuff. So let's call this the SimpleTrader view model abstract factory, and we'll make this public, and it'll implement the interface that we just created. And all that we're going to do in this function is just execute this switch statement from our update current view model command. So let's go ahead and copy this, and we'll paste it in there. And instead of setting a current view model, we're just going to return view models instead. So we'll return a home view model if it's home, a portfolio view model if it's portfolio, and if we get some kind of invalid view type, we're actually just going to throw an argument exception, and we'll say something like the view type does not have a view model. And then the argument name, or the param name, will just be view type. Now this still really isn't helping us because all of this stuff still isn't coming from our dependency injection container. So what we're going to do is we're going to implement factories for each type of view model, and then we're going to register those factories with our dependency injection container, and then our abstract factory is going to receive a factory for each of these view models, and it'll just ask that factory for the specified view model. And that's why it's called an abstract factory, because it's going to take in a bunch of other factories. So if that's a little bit confusing, I can assure you it's all going to make sense once we start implementing these factories. So to do that, we're going to create a new interface, and this will just be called the iSimpleTrader ViewModelFactory. It's not abstract, and all that it's going to do is, first of all, it's going to be generic, and it's going to be called create view model. So all that it's going to do is create a view model of type T, and we could even put a constraint on T, so where T is view model base. So that enforces all generic types have to be a view model. So now that we have this interface, what we can do is we can go ahead and implement a class called the home view model factory. And what this class is going to do is just create view models for us, or home view models for us. So we'll call this the SimpleTrader view model factory for home view models. So we'll implement this interface, and all that's going to do is return a new home view model. And of course our home view model takes a major index listing view model, so we're going to need to create a factory for that as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So this will be the major index listing view model factory. And again, implement this interface. And let's go ahead and return. Now we don't actually call the constructor for this. We're going to call our load major index view model. And this takes a major index service. Now where are we going to get that from? We're not going to new it up. We're going to actually pass it through the constructor. So let's make a property for that. And then we can generate a constructor. Make this read only too. And now why is this significant? Well, we're going to register this factory with our dependency injection container. So that means when we ask for this factory, we're going to get the major index service that we have specified in our dependency injection container. So that means all of this is going to come from the dependency injection container. And then another thing we're going to do is pass that factory into our, what is this going to be? An iSimpleTrader view model factory for major index listing view models. We'll just call this view model, call this major index view model factory. And now we're going to pass this through the constructor as well. So that means when we register our home view model factory with the dependency injection container, it's going to automatically give us the major index view model factory that we register. So now we can use that ViewModelFactory to create the major index listing view model. And now, last but not least, we're going to go back to our abstract factory, and this is going to take an iViewModelFactory for the home view model, and we'll call this home ViewModelFactory, and it can be read-only because we're just going to pass it through the constructor. And now we can get rid of all of this and just call the home ViewModelFactory create view model. And then we're going to register this simple trader view model abstract factory in our dependency injection, and it's going to give us the home ViewModelFactory. So now, last but not least, we have to do the same thing for our portfolio view model. So we'll create a portfolio ViewModelFactory, make that public, making a whole lot of factories. And all we're going to do here is just return a new portfolio view model, because we haven't even implemented that yet, but this will just be a placeholder. And then we're also going to inject a portfolio ViewModelFactory into our abstract factory. And then let's just create a new constructor. Whoops, did I do that right? I did, okay. Let's get rid of the old one. And there we go. Oh, and then we have to also call that factory down here. Okay. Now, some of you might be thinking, this is nonsense creating all these factories. Why do you create factories? Why don't you just actually pass in your portfolio view model into your ViewModelFactory and then just return it down here? And the reason we're creating factories instead is because I want a different view model every time that I switch views. So I can't actually just register the view model in our dependency injection container. I need to actually register a factory that will create the view model when I need it. I'm feeling pretty good about all of my factory implementations. Now I just need to register them in our dependency injection container. So let's head back to our app.xaml.cs and register all of these factories. So all of these are going to be registered as singletons because they don't have any state associated with them. All they really do is just create view models when we need them, so it's okay if we share these instances. And the first one we need to implement is the view model abstract factory. I say first thing, but it actually doesn't matter the order that you register services, so it's okay if we did this one first, last. It really doesn't matter. And let's actually just import this, and then we can say we want the simple trader view model abstract factory implementation for this service. And you guys might actually think that it's kind of crazy to create an interface for this, but down the road I actually do have an idea where I want to have a different implementation of this abstract factory, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be fun. And then we need to also register all of our individual view model factories. So we have the home view model factory, and that's just going to be the concrete home view model factory. And then let's copy this for the other two view models we have. So we also have portfolio view model and major index listing view model. And then we also have factories for all of those as well. And then also we need to register the major index service for this major index listing view model factory. So let's register that. That'll be a singleton as well. And there we go. So we should have everything registered that we need for our entire application. But we actually need to implement this abstract factory in our update current view model command. So let's go ahead and get rid of all of this. And we need to actually get an instance of that abstract factory. So let's create a field up here. And we can make this read-only I simple trader view model abstract factory. Let's import that. We'll just call this ViewModelFactory. And let's generate a new constructor so we can get rid of this one. Generate a constructor. And let's go ahead and make this read-only as well. And now all we need to do is say down here that the Navigator selected or current view model is going to equal the ViewModelFactory's created view model for the view type that we get as a parameter for this execute method. So that'll give us the correct view model, set it on the Navigator, but now we need to pass this simple trader view model abstract factory into this update current view model command. And we're not actually going to register the update current view model command because it's kind of funky how we create this. So we have to pass in the Navigator into this. So in the end, we could create a factory for the update current view model command, but I really don't want to. I think I'm just going to have the Navigator instantiate the update current view model command, for now at least. If down the road we need a different update current view model command, then we can go ahead and register a factory with our dependency injection container and handle that case. So our Navigator is going to take in the, I'm sick of typing this, where is, I'm just going to copy that, put it in there. So our Navigator is going to take a ViewModelFactory into its constructor, and then it's going to set the update current view model command to a new update current view model command, pass in itself, and also pass in the ViewModelFactory. And let's get rid of that, make it just a regular property. And there we go. So we have our Navigator registered with our dependency injection container. So this ViewModelFactory is going to get passed in automatically. And now we should have everything in place for this to work. So let's go ahead and we can actually just run the application, and everything should be working as we expect. And there we go, everything still loads. We can switch view models, and it's perfect. Everything is now isolated. All of our services are isolated in our service provider right here. So the rest of our application doesn't actually know about these concrete implementations, which is great. So say that one day the financial modeling prep API just disappears forever and we can't use this stock price service anymore. Well, if we found a different API to get stock information from, we could implement a new stock price service and just register it right here, and our application would still work. So that is why, that's really one of the greatest benefits of dependency injection containers, is that you register all your services at the root of your application, and you can just swap them out whenever you need to. So last thing I actually want to do is, let's go ahead and register our main window with our dependency injection container. So what we can do is, let's go into this, and we're going to change this constructor to take a data context in. And then we're going to set the data context right here. And one thing to note is that even though our data context is a main view model, I'm not going to put that right here because I don't want my window to actually explicitly know about main view models. If all I need is an object, that's all I'm going to ask for in this constructor. So now we have that constructor, and let's register our main window. So down here, we will add this as scoped again, and it's going to be a main window, but we're going to be doing something a little bit funky here. So we need to register this with a main view model, but we want to get our main view model from our dependency injection container. So what we can actually do is, inside this add scoped method, there's actually an overload where you can pass in a func, or a function, just like a little lambda expression, And the parameter, the input parameter for that function is the iServiceProvider. So what you can do is you can basically just use the service provider in this function as if it's already been built. So we can say get required service main view model, and when we call this, it's going to give us the main view model that we register in our dependency injection container at the time that we ask for the main window. And that is super powerful. So now all we need to do is we can get rid of this and we can just resolve our main window. And that's all we need to do to start our application. And what is the issue I'm having here? Just another parenthesis. So now if I run this, we should resolve our main window. It should have a main view model, and our application should be perfect. And there we go. So that's dependency injection in .NET Core WPF. Definitely something I recommend that people implement, and it's going to help us with the maintainability and infrastructure of our application. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for this part of the series. If you guys enjoyed, have any questions, criticisms, or other comments, be sure to leave them below in the comment section. But other than that, if you learned something new or just simply enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like or subscribe for more. Thank you.